He has a PhD in materials engineering. He spent 25 years in America, working with top companies and building a number of equipment. To his credit, 22 US issued patents. Now back in Ghana, Professor Fred McBagonluri is helping develop the next generation of African innovators who will solve Africa's problems. He is the president of Academic City College in Accra, Ghana.
I spent 25 years in the United States. I was lucky enough to have attended some of the best schools. I went to MIT. Obviously, it doesn't get better than that. I did my PhD work at Princeton. I spent time at Purdue University School of Aeronautics. I tried to become an astronaut. I went all the way to finalist. I rose to be vice president of new product development in the United States. Life was good. I couldn't have asked for a better life. But it comes to time where you say, how do you want the last narrative of your life to be written? Do you want to write it? Or do you want history to write it for you? And so I would say about 5 years ago, about 6 years ago, which is about maybe 2013, I had come home to visit, and my niece was a student at Ashesi University at the time. And on each prior visit, she would say, you need to come and see our school, you need to come and see our school, it's such an amazing place. So on this occasion, she succeeded in convincing me and driving me all the way from Sakumono to Berkusu, which was the most difficult trip of my lifetime. So I was whining all the way up the hill. I said, what is it that I need to do? Why do I have to go see this place? And she kept saying, you will like the experience. So when we got to Berkusu, I remember telling her, I said, a journey this awful better lead to something good. Then we went up the hill. I saw Ashesi and I was completely enthralled. I said, wow, this is so beautiful. I never knew anything like this could happen in tropical Africa. So I went up and I met Patrick Ewua, the president, and I said, I'm so impressed with what you've done here. If there is ever an opportunity for me to contribute, I would like to come back. If you ever start engineering, just call me. And so lo and behold, 2 years later, Ashesi starts engineering, and I saw the advert for a dean of engineering. Actually, it was head of engineering. And so I made some inquiries, and I met Patrick in Washington, D.C., and we had a conversation. And I left him, went to New Jersey, where I also interviewed for a vice president for research and development for Abbott Labs, which is the dream of anybody in the medical devices field. And I got that job offer. So the question was what to do. And my mother was visiting at the time, and I said, Mom, this is the situation. And she said two things that I remember quite poignantly. The first one was, son, if you made a promise to this man 2 years ago that if he starts engineering, you come help him, you have to keep your word. The second is, you've been here for 25 years, it's time to go home. And so that is how I came back. And so what motivates me is basically the experiences that I've acquired. I'm not an academic. I came from industry. I spent all my life in industry. And to be able to blend that in academia, I think it's really changing the narrative for the students that we educate here. But above all, when I look at this campus and I see all the Ghanaian students, the African students running across this campus, the sense of relief I get is that there is still a bright future for this continent. So we have students from about 18 African countries. Majority of them are Ghanaians. We have Malians here, we have Gabonese here, we have Central Africa Republic, we have Togolese, Beninois, Cape Verde, Equatorial Guinea, Chad. Yeah. So we have an American, 2 Americans here. Yeah. But it's pretty continental. I think this is the richest continent on earth, undoubtedly. I think what we have always misfocused on is our inability to align what our realities are, our contextual realities, with the educational system that we need to resolve them. And that is what everybody else seems to have done. So if you are good in producing cocoa, how come you don't have a university that focuses on cocoa production? You have to start from your strength. You can't play your weaknesses all the time. You have to start from your strength.
And I guess also processing it as well, not just...
Exactly. So it has to be end to end. So the point I was getting to is that if anybody on earth needs to study anything about cocoa, Ghana should be the place that they go. Ghana Cocoa University should be the place that they go to learn how to grow the seedling, the type of chemistry. You just need to bring that transdisciplinary knowledge, even how to market cocoa products to it. Then you are playing from your point of strength. Now, we are a mining nation. We should have the best mining university on earth. Undoubtedly, we have one, but I can't vouch if it's the best one in the world. I'm saying it should be world class, that if anybody wants to learn how to mine gold and diamond, Ghana should be the place. And when you do that, remember the research components come in. The industrialization actually piggybacks off the research. Then you also have to look at what your needs are. Agriculture is a major source of employment for a lot of people. Why are we not scaling it? Then you look, we live in a hostile environment. In fact, I'll come to a point that will be quite interesting for you. We live in a hostile environment where we have climate challenges. But look at how much rain runs off and destroys our roads when they happen. Why are we not harvesting rain? We live in an environment where we have a lot of sunlight, yet electricity costs are exorbitant. Why can't we harness solar energy? Why our research not focus on solving our immediate problems and then selling off some of the solutions? So we teach a liberal arts component to all our programs. And we treat Africa as a problem to be solved, okay? And that problem sits at the center of this universe we call our liberal arts core. So we ask the students, if Africa were a problem, how will you solve it? Now, when you go around the streets of Ghana and you ask people, what are the challenges that this continent has? They will say, oh, leadership. We are not critical thinkers. We need to be more entrepreneurial. Now, we take that seriously. We come back and you say, for you to build Africa, we need to teach you to be critical thinking. So all our students take a course in critical thinking. We need to have better leaders. Our students take 2 modules of courses in leadership. We need to be entrepreneurs. All our students take 4 modules in entrepreneurship. And then we say, in order to be critical thinkers, we also have to agree to disagree. So we teach a course in not in critical thinking, but in literal criticism. We call it text and meaning. And then we say, having learned all this, don't forget that you are still going to operate in an environment that is challenging. So our students take a course called Doing Business in Africa. And so this is how we package the liberal arts, and before that, the African Studies course was taught around the ancient empires, how we were once so great. And I said, we no longer need to have the nostalgia of the past. Let's confront the realities of today. Where is Africa and where do we need to go from here? So let's look at Africa post-colonialism and say, when this continent was handed over to us, what did we do to it? We wrecked it. There was civil disobedience, there was civil wars, there was hunger, there was droughts everywhere. Let's understand that. But more importantly, let's also understand the entrepreneurial opportunities that are in here by virtue of the fact that we live in a hostile environment where there is climate challenges, there is disease, but we should not belabor those. Let's find solutions to these problems, and that is what entrepreneurship is. So we teach the recent history of Africa, and then we say what are the challenges and what are the components of knowledge we need to aggregate in order to fix this thing called Africa. So I think we need STEAM education. I say STEAM because sometimes the engineers and the scientists will say, oh, we don't need the arts. But the beauty about the arts, the A part, so science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics, I think the arts part is where the critical thinking really comes from. And I'll tell you why. You know, the guy that first used the word robot was not an engineer. He was a novelist. He was a Czech novelist. And he took the word from their language, which is called rogata, which means a servant or a serf. And he wrote almost a mystery novel around this creature that was self-controlling. Many years later, a biochemist, a Russian-American biochemist called Isaac Asimov, who was a science fiction writer, wrote about humanoid robots. This in the 1920s. And those books, those series of books, fired the imagination of young men and women, and today humanoid robots are not just things of fiction, they are real. And so the reading, the fiction, that all comes from the arts, can inform the sciences a lot. Now, when we're growing up, we all saw pictures of creatures, what creatures could look like on Mars, right? These UFOs with big eyes. And astronauts, kids who read those novels have become astronauts looking for this kind of creatures in Mars. So firing the imagination, challenging the imagination comes from the arts. And then the STEM part is really the solutions, where you get your solutions from. So I think we need to emphasize that both are important. You know, that if you're an engineer, I read and write. I've written 9 novels and I'm an engineer. You know, so firing the imagination is the remotest source of critical thinking, and I think a STEAM-based education, you know, another thing that we do here that I didn't mention is that all our students take a course in computer programming, all of them, irrespective of what your major is, because we want you to be future ready. We don't know what the jobs of the future are going to be, but actually we know the skill set that are going to be required. You have to be a critical thinker, you have to be adaptive. So the extensional model comes in, and you have to be able to analyze data. And one way of analyzing data, it's really being able to use the right set of tools. So I think we need to create a niche where we want to be good at. If we want to be the Silicon Valley of West Africa, we have to emphasize our computer sciences, we have to emphasize the STEAM. But again, the art is so important because if our grandmothers know how to make bread, they have all the steps, which is the pseudocode, right? And 2 bakers using the same ingredients will produce different breads. If you tell your grandmother that your bread making recipe is actually a computer code, they will not believe that. But it is the artist or the arts person who will be able to explain to the computer science in natural language what they are thinking, and it is that natural language that transitions into a design code, an architectural code, and the computer codes that we all use. So that is why we have to emphasize STEAM. You know, sometimes I struggle to separate the myth from the reality, and if any people have been more stigmatized in human history, it has always been Africans. But let me also convince you that in all the schools that I went to, more often than not, the best students in those universities are from Africa. And even in the most developed countries, the guys that are actually pushing technology to its limits are either immigrants or children of immigrants, first generation. The advanced world was built completely on the intellectual capital of immigrants. Africans are the most educated people in the United States. 98% of Africans in the United States have a high school diploma. When it comes to graduate degrees, as compared to white Americans, Africans have twice the number. About 12.6% of white Americans have graduate degrees. For Africans, it's 26%. So we have to start pulling ourselves out of this, what I call this stigmatization that with time begins to become an outlook of the people themselves. It is not true. Africans are some of the most widely read. Our society is beginning to change, but you go online and the number of Africans that are online. I created a Facebook group about 10 years ago to just see how many kids from northern Ghana, from Upper West region were online. Today I have almost 15,000 people on it in less than 10 years. So I think it's a myth. So this is the chicken and the egg story. Which one comes first? I had indicated earlier that one of the questions that we have to answer is, what do we want to be when we grow up? If we want to become an industrialized country, a world-class industrialized country producing our stuff, then how do we position our educational system in such a way that it addresses that? The academics will tell you there are no industries. So what are they talking about? Where are the industries that are looking for our skill sets and they can't have them? They are not there. Now, so we are producing the textbook. The classical mission of our university is to produce graduates, give them degrees, and let them go out there and look for jobs. So I think it takes more than what does industry want and what is academia producing, and we have to transition it to what is in our best national interest. What do we want? If you start from there, the other solutions are easier. You can give company tax breaks so that they can take students on internships and train them and hire them. Other nations do exactly that. You can have industries sending projects to academia to have them to resolve it. When I was at MIT, most of our homeworks are actually consulting gigs given to teachers. And he knows he has 128 brilliant kids in his class. At the end of that homework, 1 or 2 will solve his consulting problems. So it's a handshake, and we just need to figure out who is facilitating that handshake. Government. Absolutely. Government has value. Government has 3 key values in every society. They have access to all the waves, all the radio, television. Government has access to that. So they have powerful propaganda machinery, which in marketing you call it what? Branding and advertisement. So government has that power. Government has regulatory reach or policy reach, right? If government decides that you should hire only trained teachers, you are going to hire only trained teachers, so they can control the regulatory framework. The third power that government has is procurement. If government were to come here today and say Academic City is designing a low-cost ventilator, we're going to order 1 million from them. Here is 200,000 advance. This technology will fly out of here in the next month. So these are the powers that government has that we need to leverage. And once we can leverage this properly, some of this conversation will no longer be needed. Regulatory, procurement, and branding.